Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we gather in Malta to discuss one of the most pressing global issues of our generation. This meeting is unique because it brings together European and African leaders to discuss migration, an issue of common concern to us all.
Welcome to this special MaltaToday podcast. The Valletta summit is underway. Negotiators have already hammered out the basis of any conclusions or resolutions that will be forthcoming, but there are also disagreements about the way the EU is thinking about migration. Because while politicians say they want to give people fleeing persecution and war safe refuge, they are also supporting a new border agenda that outsources patrolling efforts and keep out policies to Africa, as Carl Schember from the Norwegian Refugee Council will tell us. Of the 800,000 migrants that are believed to have arrived in Europe by sea so far in 2015, 150,000 came from African countries like Eritrea, Nigeria and Somalia. We have seen some of them in Malta, but they were rescued mainly by Italy. But this number is dwarfed by the arrival of some 650,000 people, mostly Syrians, via Turkey and Greece. People like Oxfam's EU migration policy advisor, Sara Tesorieri, has said that when people risk their lives to reach Europe, despite hearing the reports of the too many who have died trying, it clearly tells us that the EU's approach is failing. Which is what Abdul Malik Ahmed Mohammed will tell us, although adding a cynical viewpoint to news of legal channels for migration. In this video podcast, we will also speak to Carlotta Sami, press officer for Southern Europe of the UNHCR. She says that readmissions are part of an effective asylum system, but what should be given priority during the summit is the creation of concrete legal channels for refugees seeking protection in Europe.
So for us, what is very important for this summit is to create concrete legal channels for refugees to join, to receive protection in Europe. Legal channels for refugees, and the other way, a regular path for migrants to reach Europe. Because here we have two different flows, two different motivation behind the decision of people to leave. Refugees leave a country because they have no other choice. Then we have migrants, many times even vulnerable and with very difficult conditions that are trying to reach a better social condition. They should be allowed to do that in a regular way. For example, if we speak in terms of the labor market and the labor regulation, we know that the life for the migrants can be very, very hard because they are exposed to abuse, to exploitation, to smuggling and to trafficking. And also for us it's very important that this summit leads to concrete action to support the countries that since many years are hosting hundreds of thousands of refugees.
What is the concrete action? Giving more money?
Increasing the funds is something, but even helping these countries to increase their capacity, the capacities of the human resources, the capacity to strengthen the statal structures, that many times are so weak that are not able to give the citizens the possibility to develop, okay? And we have very difficult situation in Africa. If you think at the Horn of Africa, so you have Somalia, you have Eritrea, you have Ethiopia. Well, there we see 20 million of people in humanitarian need. And we know that development actions until now have not impacted enough.
Carlotta Sami also dispelled suggestions that creating a legal system of migration for African asylum seekers and migrants would create a sort of chaotic pull factor for more people to come to Europe.
We see that chaos will only, not management, so not regularizing, will only feed the network of the smugglers and the traffickers, while the flow will continue in an unmanaged way. So it's for the benefit of everybody to give regulation and management.
At the New Tiger Bar in Marsa, where many of the refugees and asylum seekers and other migrants hang around by the open center in Marsa, many of them seemed unaware or uninterested in the fact that European and African leaders were meeting in Valletta. In fact, if you had to ask them, most of them would have said that the most pressing concern was getting a job. Abdul Malik Ahmed Mohammed, 20 years of age from Somalia, was cynical about news that EU leaders were considering legal channels for migration. and he was equally cynical about what African leaders could do for people like him.
They cannot do like this. If they do like this, I don't come here by boat.
You wouldn't come by boat?
Yes, I wouldn't come by boat here. I come to here by passport, but they don't do like this. Why now they are talking about?
Because lots of
many people they suffer and they survive, and they are talking about that. How many people die? Many people they die before. Why before they don't talk about it? Now they are talking about it. Now no one believes that in Africa. If you tell them you can go with travel documents, no one believes. Everyone will come to survive by boat. Because you don't believe that. Because African leaders, they are not good. They don't do for us nothing. If they do us something good, we don't survive and we don't come to Europe and anywhere else. We stay our Africa. But they fuck our life. It's American and African leaders.
Let us now observe a minute of silence to remember all those who lost their lives in the pursuit for a better life.
And from that contribution, we go to Carl Schemby, the regional media director of the Norwegian Refugee Council, who is based in Jordan.
What we see from here, especially as regards Syrian and Iraqi refugees, is that more and more of these refugees, over 4 million are in the region who have fled from Syria, over 4 million refugees, and they are more and more faced with a very stark reality. Two extreme choices they will have to do. Either go back in the war zone they fled from in Syria, or take the lethal journey to Europe, potentially die on the way with their children, with their families, to reach safer grounds. Because living here is becoming more and more unsustainable. Aid is dwindling, funding is dwindling, but also their rights, their right to work, their registration rights, and their right to stay here legally is also coming under pressure, because many refugees are being deregistered by the governments here in the region. They cannot cope anymore. The borders are practically closed, and it's harder than ever for refugees to live in this region. So we see a lot of Syrians, Iraqis, people from this area taking the dangerous trip to Europe. This is about refugees, and it seems that they are the least to be remembered in these summits. Where are they? Where are their voices? Malta has just suspended Schengen just when we are debating migration. This is when we should have had more voices in the actual summit from the people who are forced to make this route. What did they go through? What they are facing? We know a lot of them are dying. We don't even know the exact figures. We know that the Mediterranean is the cemetery of Europe, and it should be the shame of Europe because of the failed leadership. So we're thinking about refugee protection, resettlement of Syrian refugees. Less than 3%. Governments around the world have agreed to less than 3% of all the refugees in the region and from Syria to be resettled in richer countries, when we've been calling for at least 10% of the most vulnerable who are here in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey, Egypt and Iraq to be resettled safely. Let's not put them through this lethal endeavor, putting their children themselves at risk of dying.
Carl, do you think that the EU should be taking a more active role in border countries to prevent the flow of refugees from these border countries? That is, shouldn't we be asking ourselves what is wrong with Turkey? Why are these people not finding safety in a country like Turkey, and they're taking this dangerous route out of Turkey?
Yes, to begin with, the European countries and richer nations who can contribute so much more to the global migration crisis, they should be tackling the root causes of what's driving people to flee from their countries. In the case of Syria, there should be so much more pressure on the warring parties so that there is peace. But in the meantime, the refugees are forced to flee for their life. And it is becoming more and more unsustainable for them to stay in the host countries, which are now hosting more than 4 million for more than 4 years, 4 million refugees from Syria alone. It's becoming harder and harder for them to stay because these countries have had to close their borders. They've had to impose limits on working rights, on who can work, on the kind of access to education and health, because they cannot cope. They have also very poor communities which are also suffering. Lebanese Jordanians who are suffering as much as the Syrian refugees here. So the first for Europe, first of all, this shouldn't be about border controls. It should not be about outsourcing the border patrols and getting other countries to do this job for them. Imposing more checkpoints further out of Europe, all that will do is force more illegal smuggling, force more people to go underground and take even more dangerous roads to safety. So what they should be concerned about is actually providing safe ways for those who should be eligible, who need the utmost protection, the most vulnerable people who can't go back because of their religion, because of their creed, because of their ideology, their politics, because they are civilians who are persecuted because of war, in the case of Syria and Iraq. Those should be helped. The most vulnerable should be given a safe option for resettlement inside Europe. Then we can talk about the best ways to do that, and about, we're asking for at least 10% of Syria's refugees in the region to be able to be resettled. But we've seen a commitment by international governments, richer nations, taking less than 3% of the 10% that we asked.
Kosh Cambry from the Norwegian Refugee Council. And that was our special podcast from Malta Today. Please stay tuned to our live blog on maltatoday.com.mt.